First off, I want to thank everyone for coming. I want to thank the organizers, particularly Gary Cottrell, for putting this together. I'm going to speak a little bit about the funding environment and the sort of past and the present and the future of CRCNS. And in doing so, I also want to take a moment to both acknowledge and celebrate Ken Wang. So there's, I think, outside of the government, oftentimes an impression that the structures, the sound is not too good, that the structures by which we fund science are fixed points, right? There's an SBE directorate, and therefore the person in charge of it is someone who just happened to be given that job. That's not true. CRCNS exists because of an act of will by Ken Wang. It persisted and has persisted for over 20 years now because of a continuous act of will by Ken Wang and by a bunch of the various program officers that you're going to meet today. In the absence of the effort that he put in, this community would not exist. And in the absence of the excellence that this community has repeatedly demonstrated, it would not have persisted either. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about what CRCNS is actually, and hopefully that clarity will be a benefit to you as you think about the future of this community and how you are trying to acquire funding within it. And along the way, we're going to discover exactly how cool Ken actually is. Okay, I can think of nothing that more directly demonstrates how awesome Ken is than an accident that happened this morning. I did not think I would be here, so I did not bring with me a picture of Ken Wang for this talk. So I went and Googled Ken Wang NSF, and I will show you what happened. First, the four people you see here are the people that are taking over for Ken Wang. I am the nominal program coordinator, but we're going from one person to four. You'll meet all of them today. When you Google their names with NSF, their headshots and my own are amongst the top two things that you see in the Google image search. When you Google Ken Wang, this is the closest that you get. Ken liked to fade into the background. This is a picture from the 2007 CRCNS PI meeting. I am not entirely sure that Ken Wang is in this picture, except that I have some evidence that that's him. Speaking, but I'm not 100%. My evidence that that's Ken is basically that he's dead center in the shot, which is where he should be. They have the right posture, the right expression. Roughly, Ken was very fond of blue shirts. And his height is obscured because he was actually and is very tall, but you never know that from electronic media. So even though he doesn't look tall here, I took that as evidence that that's Ken. But Ken consistently faded into the background, even though he was building a thing that is actually quite unique in the entirety of the science funding apparatus. What Ken has managed to do, and actually some of the program officers and organizations you're going to meet later on today, is to really build an interdisciplinary community and to sustain it. And that's very hard to do. And the reason for that is that the disciplinary structures that we're all familiar with, even though they are intellectual structures, as soon as they interact with budgets, they become actual things. And those budgets are defended. And so most of the time, interdisciplinary communities last as long as the funding lasts. That's just a reality. You can't do the research without the money. But those budgets have a tendency to be self-reinforcing. In moments of great change, in particular, agencies and programs come back to core mission. And interdisciplinary work oftentimes doesn't exactly fit that mission. All right. So right now, for example, we are in not unprecedented, but extreme moment of upheaval in the scientific funding apparatus. People retreat to mission. Nonetheless, CRCNS persists, right? This is a remarkable trick. So what Ken Wang did was to take subparts of the NSF, which you can see on the right, a subset of them actually, that have very different underlying interests, but to realize a way in which you could build a community that simultaneously met all of their missions. And he did so by taking quite a firm bet, right? Which was that he could, as a program officer sitting within the SCI's directorate, whose primary mission is to advance the understanding of computer science, that there was a way in which understanding complex cognition and the neural systems that support it was going to advance that mission. And he went ahead and built and built the CRCNS program with a mission only mildly aligned to the SIZE mission, and then kept it going for 20 plus years. And he did so not completely in the blind. There's very good historical reasons to expect that this was going to pay off. In fact, if you look at the beginnings of AI, you can see hints of cognitive neuroscience, computational neuroscience right from the very beginning. You see, various old and recent luminaries in the field there on the left, many of which can funded in the course of CRCNS. And so he took a bet that you could take this combination of computational approaches, an understanding of the biology and of the behavior, and that you could make advances that were going to subserve the mission of SIZE, which was his home directorate, but then also the general mission of a bunch of other agency partners. And that worked, right? And so essentially what he stood up was a unified mechanism by which we review and provide all of the information necessary for a bunch of different agencies with very different missions to make funding decisions. Okay, there is a single review process. Many of you have participated in it, or certainly you've been subjected to it, in which material comes in, is reviewed by a set of panels, and then a number of different funders come in and take advantage of that review process. It has not only persisted for 21 years, it has adapted, it has survived, and it has grown. It has in fact done almost nothing but get bigger. And that is despite the fact that it went through a bunch of upheavals, right? We're talking 5 different administrations, including the current one. The last competition just ran. We anticipate, of course, running more. Entire sea changes in the underlying methods of both neuroscience and the focus of the program itself, and a birth of a new wave of AI. And not only did it survive that wave of AI, it helped to drive it. Here's just a couple of examples of people that were funded by CRCNS that went on to fund companies. Some of their names are obviously going to be familiar. Okay, and not only did the PIs go on to found companies, it powers this wave of AI because a ton of the students that all of you have trained have ended up in industry. I understand, I am an academic, it is painful when you see an excellent student leave academia, but this is remarkable. This is a kind of success that you don't oftentimes see in a scientific program. It is also critical to why this program persists. You train hard, you train well, and it shows. Okay, I'll talk a little bit about the mechanism because I think it's a bit opaque from the outside, and I think there is actually a benefit to understanding it as you're structuring your future proposals. All right, what CRCNS is a relatively diffuse set of topics that all fit underneath the heading of computational neuroscience. Those topics are to some degree overlapping and to some degree not. Okay, and the way that this mechanism functions, and it is fairly unique within the federal government, is that we run this centralized review process, and then a bunch of other partners outside of the NSF can take advantage of it. So you have, for example, an entity like the Department of Energy, and it might only have a very narrow, right, say in neuromorphic computing. Okay, and it is free to then come observe the underlying review process, which yields a ranked list, right, of neuromorphic computing proposals by their scientific quality, because that is the core of the evaluation. And now the Department of Energy is free to start at the top of that list and work their way down. Okay. At the same time, you might have the Department of Defense that has an interest in something completely different, securing the national defense, and maybe they care very deeply about a different set of topics like robotics. That works fine. You have an entity like the National Institutes of Health, who you hear from shortly. They might have a broad interest in almost every topic, depending on its relation to translational impact. They are free to come and take the entire list. And then you have outside companies that don't really provide funding, but that benefit, because at the center of this are the trainees that you are producing and skill sets that then serve them well in industry and complete that loop, right, where it shows what the value of the investment actually is. And the reason that this works is really an insight from Ken Wang, right, which is that it is possible to run this kind of a review process because of the flexibility of the NSF and because its mission encompasses the entirety of science. Okay, this is a remarkable thing to have built and to have sustained as well. Okay, this has worked very well. These are statistics from this last year. You can see across the top there a bunch of the current partners. You can see it includes not only multiple agencies within the federal government, multiple subparts of those agencies as well, 5 different international agencies as well. The PI meeting, which we are all attending today, and overall, over around $50 million worth of funding went out in FY 2024. Okay, the FY 26 competition, the deadline for which just closed a couple of days ago. We had a very healthy set of proposals come in. We will evaluate those in due course. I know that is a concern in the room. I cannot tell you exactly when that evaluation process is going to be done due to the disruptions in the closing of the federal government and changing administration priorities. But I would anticipate that we will get you decisions by sometime in the early summer. We expect this competition to continue to run. The core of it is going to be the reviews. Okay, and that is again the community. Okay, it is a lot of people in this room. In the absence of those reviews, this does not work. The right way to do program administration, in my opinion, and I believe it is shared by all the people you're going to hear from today, right, is to let the community shape the scientific direction. But that is the review process. That's how you do it. And so it's critically important that those reviews come in, they come in a timely fashion, and that it's relatively easy to solicit them, because the harder it is to get expert opinion, the less expert opinion is going to determine what gets funded. Yeah. Okay, the future of CRCNS. As some of you may have noticed, the last due date that is currently publicly available just passed. That is because the program will need to be renewed next year. I cannot promise that renewal will happen, given the upheavals in the scientific apparatus, but I think the arguments are quite strong, and there is thus far quite strong support, both within the NSF and amongst the partners for continuing. Right? It clearly meets administration priorities in AI. It has a large history of success of producing both highly successful academics and then highly successful entrepreneurs as well. And it is ultimately, I think, fundamental to continuing to power this wave of AI as we run into the fundamental limits of scale. And so all of that suggests that we should be able to get it renewed. Beyond that uncertainty, it is also an opportunity for the community. In the course of that renewal, we will revisit pretty much every underlying element of the process. This is an opportunity for you to reach out to us and tell us what's working and what isn't. Very much this is an organic, evolved structure. There are bits of it that are vestigial, and there are bits of it that can be made better. The best people to understand that are actually the broader scientific community. We also do need to pick a host for next year's PI meeting. We are going to continue with the PI meetings, but we do need a volunteer to actually host it. One of the thoughts that we were bandying about is dovetailing it again with SFN, particularly because SFN next year is in DC, which will make the PI meeting a very good opportunity to showcase this community to the broader set of government funders as well. Okay, this is the contact information for the primary people within the NSF who are going to be running the program. But I want you to keep in mind that very much this functions as a marketplace. That means that your proposals meet someone's mission. If you think about and identify whose mission that is, be it basic science for the NSF, be it translational impact for the NIH, reach out to the relevant program officers there who are listed, some of them you'll meet today, and make sure that you understand what their mission is. They will ultimately make the decision to pick that proposal up. So think deeply about how it is targeted, but be aware that as much as we possibly can, the first pass and the primary determiner of whether you get funded is the reviews of this community. It is your peers. Okay, so you have to first and foremost in your best ideas and make sure that your peers get it and it's clear and it's solid science. But after that, make sure that you're understanding mission, that you have laid out how you're going to train this next generation of scientists, how we're going to continue that tradition of excellence, because that's what has kept this program going. And we should become as explicit about that as is possible. And then I'm going to just end again with this sort of now much smaller and tiny picture of Ken, who was forever fading into the background. But I think within the government scientific funding community, he does not. This is a remarkable mechanism which he built, a remarkable history of success. A lot of that is him, a lot of that is this community itself. But I will tell you now that it is highly likely to persist even through this transition, as severe as it is. And that is despite the fact that in a single year, Ken has retired, leadership of the program has shifted over. We have a new administration with massively different priorities, and CRCNS is very likely to continue. Okay, so thanks everybody, and